Have you ever found your entire day spiraling because of a single careless remark from someone? A glance of indifference, a tactless comment, or just a message left unanswered can suddenly make you feel invisible. Not because it truly matters, but because your mind replays the story of rejection, of worthlessness, of not being enough. And before you even realize it, the whole day has been hijacked by a fleeting emotion you never chose. There's a hard truth we must face. Most of the time, we're not living, we're reacting. Reacting to what people say, to delays, to unspoken insecurities. But Stoicism doesn't ask you to suppress your emotions. It asks you to face them, to understand them, and to rise above them through reason. Because power doesn't lie in controlling the outside world, but in mastering your response to it. This is not an easy path, but it is the path to true freedom. And that journey begins with a single, simple habit. 1. Emotions are not truth, they are reactions to be observed. There are times when your heart feels heavy just because someone didn't reply to your message. A careless comment in a meeting makes you feel insulted, or a passing glance makes you believe you're being disrespected. You shrink, tense up, and start replaying the scene in your head like a broken tape. You think you're responding to reality, but what you're actually reacting to is the story you've attached to the event. And the most dangerous part is that you don't realize you're the one who wrote that script. Stoic philosophy recognized this long ago. Epictetus once said, "It's not events that disturb us, but our judgments about them." It sounds simple, but within it lies one of the most vital keys to freeing ourselves from emotional enslavement. You're not hurt because someone stayed silent. You're hurt because you believe that silence means you're not worth hearing. You're not anxious because your boss hasn't replied to an email. You're anxious because your mind is spinning a narrative. They're unhappy. I must have made a mistake. Maybe I'm being replaced. What wounds you isn't the reality, it's how you interpret it. What matters here is not that you're wrong for feeling that way. Every emotion has its reason for appearing. But that doesn't make it true. Emotions are signals, not truth. They're knocks at the door, not the master of the house. Whenever a feeling arises, you have two choices. Either let it drive you or observe it with clarity. And when you can say, "I feel hurt, but I don't have to act like someone who's been hurt," you begin to reclaim control. Imagine a ship tossed by heavy waves. If you stay below deck, see the water spilling in, and assume the ship is sinking, you'll panic. But if you climb to the deck and see clearly the waves are only rocking the ship, not sinking it, you'll be calm enough to steer again. Observing your emotions is like stepping up on that deck. It doesn't make the storm disappear, but it gives you a different view from outside the chaos, not inside it. Stoicism doesn't teach us to be cold. It teaches us to be clear. Clear about this. Not every thought that enters your mind deserves your trust, and not every emotion demands your obedience. Once you see that, you begin to live more deliberately. You no longer react out of impulse, but respond by choice. You move from "I'm an anxious person" to "I'm experiencing anxiety, and I can sit with it instead of resisting it." This is not easy. It takes practice. But just as muscles grow stronger when exercised, your ability to observe emotions does too. Each time you pause before reacting, each time you ask a question instead of responding on autopilot like, "Why do I feel this way? Is this real? Can I see this differently?" You widen the space between stimulus and response. And in that space, as Viktor Frankl said, lies your freedom and your power. 2. Practice before the storm comes. We all know bad days will come. Days when nothing goes right, people aren't kind, Work doesn't flow, and even you don't feel like yourself. Yet strangely, even knowing this is inevitable, we still enter each day with a quiet expectation that things should go smoothly, people should understand us, life should be gentle. And when reality doesn't match that illusion, we fall apart, frustrated, confused, upset as if we forgot that storms are part of the weather. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If something is inevitable, prepare for it as one who has been warned." In Stoic thought, there's a practice called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Not to be pessimistic or fearful, but to train the mind to remain steady in chaos. It's not magic, it's training. Imagine you're an athlete. You don't wait until the day of competition to start training. You don't wait until you face an opponent to learn how to dodge a blow. You train every day, without pressure, so when the moment comes, your body responds naturally without panic. Your mind is no different. You can't expect calm in a crisis if you've never practiced it. Calm is a skill, not a trait, and like any skill, it must be forged through small, daily effort. Start with the little things. When someone cuts in line, instead of getting angry, treat it as a chance to practice patience. When an email isn't answered promptly, instead of assuming the worst, use it as a moment to practice equanimity. Every disappointment, every rejection, every time something veers from your plan is a training session for your mind. The more you train when life is quiet, the steadier you'll be when it's not. The question isn't whether we'll face challenges. The question is whether we've prepared our minds for them. If you live on reflex, waiting for life to hit before trying to balance, you'll always be reactive. But if every day you ask yourself, what could go wrong today? And if it does, how will I respond with character? You shift from victim to commander. You're no longer hoping for an easy life. You're building the strength to meet a hard one. This doesn't make you cold or negative. On the contrary, it makes you steady, trustworthy, and quietly strong. People will notice you're not easily shaken, not easily swayed, because you've prepared. And that preparation builds a silent kind of power, a strength that needs no display, yet is felt by anyone near you. The storm will come, that is certain. But you don't have to wait in fear. You can walk into each day like someone who's trained. And when the storm hits, you won't be swept away. You'll stand firm, like stone, because you never lived as if the sun would shine forever. 3. Name the emotion. So, it no longer leads you. Some nights you lie awake, staring into the dark, not knowing why you can't sleep. You're not hungry, not in pain, not busy, yet something feels empty or vaguely heavy inside. And instead of pausing to ask what's happening in your inner world, you grab your phone, scrolling through images, videos, and noise, trying to erase the feeling. But the more you scroll, the more drained you become. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're running from something you haven't yet named. When emotions go unnamed, they take control. When you don't realize you're sad, that sadness shows up as irritability, restlessness, or lack of focus. When you don't recognize fear, it shows up as procrastination, silence, or behaviors that seem harmless but drain your life force. And the danger is this. Unnamed emotions often become unspoken decisions, quietly steering your life in directions you never consciously chose. In psychology, this is called affect. The act of naming emotions calms the nervous system. When you tell yourself, "I'm feeling anxious," your brain registers that feeling as a signal, no longer a threat. It creates space between you and the experience. And in that space, you can observe, understand, and choose your response instead of being ruled by it. In Stoic philosophy, this is the essence of self-mastery. Seneca said, "Nothing is more dangerous than a mind acting without reflection." If you don't realize you're angry, anger acts on your behalf. If you don't see your envy, it will speak for you, choose for you, and destroy what you hold dear. But when you stop and say, "This is anger, this is hurt," you take back the reins. You're no longer swept away. You become the observer. Naming emotion isn't a cold, clinical act. It's one of deep compassion. You're not judging yourself for being sad or angry. You're simply saying, "I see you. I'm here with you." And sometimes that's enough to calm the storm, like a child who stops crying when they feel heard. In daily life, you can practice this as a small habit. When your heart races or you feel uneasy, pause and ask, what is this emotion called? Where is it coming from? What is it trying to tell me? This doesn't make you weak or overly sensitive. It makes you clear, self-aware, and quietly powerful. Because there is nothing stronger than someone who knows what they're going through and isn't afraid to face it. Emotions are merely guests in the house of your mind. But if you don't recognize them or call them by name, they'll assume ownership. And you, the true owner, will be pushed out of your own home. So begin by learning to name your emotions. That's the first step to making sure they no longer lead the way. 4. Voluntarily step into discomfort as a strength training. Most people live under a common but dangerous illusion that comfort is the goal. We spend years avoiding conflict, judgment, and anything that stirs even the slightest unease. We settle in a comfort zone where everything is familiar, controllable, and predictable. But one day, as life tends to do, it throws us out of that cocoon with a blow. Job loss, heartbreak, failure, illness, betrayal. And we panic. Not because it's too harsh, but because we've never trained ourselves in uncomfortable terrain. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Let your mind become accustomed to the thought that you can bear anything." And that training doesn't come from abstract philosophy, but from deliberately placing yourself in inconvenient, unstable, uncomfortable situations like a soldier preparing for the battlefield. In Stoicism, this is an essential part of practice. Voluntarily facing difficulty, not to punish yourself, but to forge resilience, build inner endurance, and become someone who can remain standing when life is no longer gentle. You don't grow strong in theory. You grow strong in action, when you deliberately say no to procrastination, even though it feels good. When you wake up early to meditate, even though the bed is warm. When you speak the truth, even when your voice trembles. When you enter a difficult conversation instead of staying silent to maintain false peace. Each of these acts, small as they may seem, is a moment where you train your inner muscle. And slowly you turn discomfort into familiarity. You no longer fear it the same way. A spiritually mature person is not someone who always feels comfortable, but someone who can step into discomfort with clarity. Knowing that in confusion, there is growth. In rejection, there is a lesson. In failure, something is being refined. They don't wait to feel ready before beginning. They understand that true strength is born from daring to act even before they feel ready. And the remarkable thing is, the more you train yourself to enter discomfort voluntarily, the less afraid you are of what you can't control. You begin to trust yourself, not because you feel confident, but because you've walked through many hard moments and survived. Real confidence comes from experience like that, not from hollow affirmations. Today's practice doesn't have to be something grand. It could simply be sitting with a negative emotion instead of trying to erase it. Going to the gym even when you feel lazy. calling someone to apologize even when you feel awkward, applying for a job you don't feel qualified for. In these acts, you are taking small steps outside your safe cocoon. And each step, no matter how shaky, is an act of courage. You can't control when the storm will come, but you can choose to train in the rain, so when the real tempest arrives, you're not caught off guard. That's not luck, that's living on purpose. 5. Step back and see from afar. Everything shrinks when you're high enough. Have you ever felt like one small thing could ruin your entire day? An unanswered message, a careless remark, a disapproving look, and suddenly you feel small. Like the whole world is against you, like life is unbearable because of one minor detail. In that moment, you get pulled into the issue, entangled, as if nothing else outside it matters. But if you've ever looked back on such moments weeks or months later, you'll see they no longer matter. They were so small that they never deserved even a second of your time. And that realization proves an important truth. Everything becomes small when seen from far enough away. Marcus Aurelius, in his private writings, reminded himself, "View everything as if you were already dead, and you are now seeing life one last time." This isn't pessimism. It's a practice of detachment, of stepping back from the emotional flood to see the whole picture with clarity. When you step back, the problem doesn't disappear, but it loses its exaggeration. When you create distance between yourself and the situation, it stops controlling you. Imagine standing close to a wall with your eyes almost touching it. All you see is a few bricks, some scratches, maybe a crack or two. But if you step back a few paces, you see the whole picture. It's a sturdy wall, and the flaws mean nothing in the grand scheme. Our minds work the same way. When you're too close to a problem, emotions distort it. When you step back, reason puts it in perspective. Stepping back here doesn't mean retreat or surrender. It means consciously creating mental space. Instead of reacting right away, you pause, you observe, you ask questions. You say to yourself, will this matter in 5 days, 5 months, 5 years? And more often than not, you'll realize what's frustrating you today is just a speck in the vast journey of life. Stoic philosophy urges us to place everything in a wider context, not to deny our emotions, but to keep them from taking full control. When you practice seeing from a higher vantage point, like looking down from a mountain, you'll notice the brevity, the fragility, even the meaninglessness of many of the grudges, arguments, and battles you've clung to. Practicing this daily is a kind of active meditation. Whenever something triggers you to react immediately, step back in your mind. Imagine looking down at yourself from above, from the perspective of a wiser version of you or your future self. Does this really matter? Is this worth your energy? That reframing brings you back to stillness. The world doesn't change when you step back, but the way you see it does. And sometimes, changing how you see is enough to change your life. 6. Ask your emotions, are you helping me? Most of us grow up never being taught how to talk to our emotions. We learn to endure, to suppress, or to react instinctively. When anger rises, we shout or go silent. When sadness comes, we distract ourselves or dive into entertainment. Rarely do we pause, face the emotion directly, and ask one simple question: are you helping me? This isn't a silly question. It's an invitation to step out of victimhood and become an observer of yourself. When a strong emotion arises, anger, fear, envy, self-pity, try stopping. Take a deep breath and ask it as if speaking to an old friend who just showed up. Why are you here? Do you bring anything useful? Or are you just repeating an old habit formed by past pain? Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If it doesn't make me better, stronger, kinder, calmer, it isn't worth keeping." Stoic philosophy doesn't reject emotions, but it asks you to assess their actual value. Like a gatekeeper of the mind, you don't let just anything in simply because it knocked. You are responsible for deciding what stays and what goes. When you're angry, ask, does this anger help solve the problem, or is it just making me suffer more? When you're sad, ask, what is this sadness warning me about? Is there something in my way of living, thinking, or loving that needs to change? And if the answer is no, if the emotion brings no insight, no solution, no positive action, then maybe it doesn't need to stay. What matters is that you do this without harshness or denial. You're not saying, "I'm not allowed to be sad." You're saying, "I feel sad, but I won't let this sadness drive the whole car." That is a gentle yet powerful stance. It's refusing to let emotion take the wheel while still letting it sit beside you, present but not in control. This practice also keeps you from falling into self-sabotage. Many people let emotions lead, then make poor decisions, hurt others, withdraw from opportunity, or ruin relationships. They think it's being true to their feelings, but really, it's living enslaved to emotions they've never understood. Emotions aren't wrong, but they're not commanders. They are signals, not orders. Asking, "Are you helping me?" Each time a strong feeling arises is how you set an internal boundary. It's the mark of someone who is awake and training someone who no longer lets their mind be occupied by anything that knocks. And if an emotion has a legitimate reason to exist, you'll know how to use it wisely instead of letting it use you. That simple question could open the door to a brighter inner life. A life where you're no longer dragged by nameless emotional tides, but instead, you learn to ride the waves with awareness, with reason, and with the courage to face yourself. 7. Choose what you can control. Let go of the rest. There are days you wake up knowing, today will be hard. A packed schedule, overwhelming tasks, unanswered messages, people you can't please, and things that will happen no matter how hard you try. In those moments, we often grow restless, trying to hold on to everything for control. But that very grasping is what makes us lose ourselves. We become tired, irritable, and drained, not because we're doing too much, but because we're carrying too many things that don't belong to us. Epictetus once said, "Some things are within your control, some are not. Knowing this is the foundation of peace." That statement, seemingly simple, is one of Stoicism's most powerful truths. It's not just a dry philosophical claim. It's a way of living, a way to walk through chaos while keeping calm within. Every day you'll encounter unwelcome things. Someone who doesn't like you, a delayed project, an unfair rejection, or even an unforeseen accident. These aren't under your control. But how you respond, how you think, how you act, how you speak to yourself will always be your choice. And that is where real power begins. When you learn to separate what's mine from what belongs to life, you begin to feel lighter. You no longer need to exhaust yourself pleasing everyone. You don't need to explain yourself to those unwilling to understand. You don't need to fight every opposing wind. You only need to do your part well. Stay honest, act kindly, respond with reason, and let the rest unfold as it will. This practice doesn't make you passive. On the contrary, it makes you deeply active, but only with what deserves your time and energy. You stop wasting yourself on controlling others. Stop arguing to be right. Stop worrying about things that haven't happened. You focus on what you can change, your thoughts, your actions, your habits, your reactions, your choices. A simple exercise you can use. When facing a stressful situation, ask yourself, which part of this is mine? If it's an emotion, a decision, a behavior, take responsibility. But if it's someone else's opinion, a delay beyond your control, or an unfair judgment, learn to release it. Not to abandon responsibility, but to abandon the illusion that you can control everything. Peace doesn't come from having everything go your way. It comes from knowing where to direct your attention. When you stop trying to control the uncontrollable, you start gaining control over what truly matters yourself. 8. Don't let others pull you into their emotions. Have you ever walked into a room and within minutes felt heavy for no reason? Maybe someone there was angry, anxious, or blaming others. And even if you came in calm, a single frown, a complaint, or a negative tone could start pulling you in. That's when someone else's emotions begin to occupy your inner space without you realizing it. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself each morning, "Today, I will meet people who are boastful, deceitful, selfish, and ungrateful. But none of them can harm me unless I let them." This wasn't just a reminder. It was a strategy to live peacefully in a chaotic world. Others may be angry, unjust, or chaotic, but you don't have to join them in that state. Emotions spread like electricity. One panicked person can make a whole room uneasy. One angry person can trigger your own anger. But in that moment, you have a choice. You can react, or you can reflect. Reacting means you get pulled in. Reflecting means you see what's happening and choose not to join. Imagine standing on the shore. Someone in the water is panicking and shouting. If you jump in without calm, they might pull you under. But if you stay steady, observe, and stay clear-headed, you can throw them a lifeline. You might even dive in, but this time with skill and awareness. True help doesn't come from sharing their chaos. It comes from staying centered when others lose their way. This doesn't mean becoming cold or indifferent. On the contrary, the more you love others, the more you must protect yourself from being swept up in their emotional waves. A loved one drowning in anxiety doesn't need another anxious person. They need someone steady enough to help them find stillness. An angry person doesn't need you to yell back. They need someone to respond with reason to model emotional control. To do this, you must build emotional boundaries. It means learning to listen without absorbing, witnessing without becoming, empathizing without dissolving. Ask yourself when facing another's emotion, whose feeling is this? If it didn't originate in you, it has no right to shape your day. And if you let someone else's mood define your own, you're giving away control you never had to lose. Practicing this daily is a high-level exercise in self-mastery. When someone gets angry with you, instead of reacting, take a breath and remind yourself, this is their emotion, not mine. When someone complains, blames, or panics, stay present but unshaken. You are not a trash bin for what others cannot process. You are a calm space where others may find peace, but only if you protect that peace for yourself first. No one can drag you into emotional hell unless you walk down there with them. And there is no greater gift you can give this world than a mind at peace amidst souls in turmoil. 9. The moment you pause, that's where real power lives. In the rush of modern life, quick reactions are almost instinctive. You get a message that upsets you, you want to reply instantly. Someone says something hurtful, you want to fire back. You're disappointed in yourself, you want to hide. In all those moments, your mind knows only one thing: immediate action. But that's not strength, that's reflex. And reflex doesn't always lead to wisdom. Real strength lies in the moment you pause. Seneca once said, "No one is free who is not master of themselves." And self-mastery doesn't begin with forcing yourself to do something grand. It begins with a single pause before reacting. One deep breath, one step back, one gentle question. Do I really need to respond right now? That pause, though small, is where destiny bends. In a single second, you can choose forgiveness over anger, listening over judging, patience over haste. And in that same second, you reclaim the steering wheel of your life instead of handing it to emotion. You don't need to be a philosopher to practice this. You only need awareness. Next time your blood rises, your heart pounds, your hands clench, see it as a signal to pause. Not to surrender, but to return to clarity. Because only when you break the automatic loop can you choose actions that align with your deepest values. The world may move fast, but you don't have to. You can slow down. You can choose your next step with clarity. You can train the muscle of pausing, and the more you train it, the stronger it becomes. And over time, you'll realize those who can pause are those who can lead. In a storm, the calmest space is the eye. In life, the calmest moment is when you can pause and refuse to be pushed by your first emotion. That is power. Inner power. No one can take that from you unless you give it away. 10. Every hardship is a lesson in disguise. There are days when hardship arrives without warning. You lose the job you've held for years. The person you trusted most turns away. Your body suddenly falls ill. Life drops you into a dark place you weren't prepared to face. And our natural reaction is always, why me? Why now? What did I do wrong? But if you pause and replace the question why with what is this here to teach me, everything begins to shift. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The obstacle on the path becomes the path." Stoic philosophy does not see difficulty as something to avoid, but as a lesson wearing the mask of challenge. Every wound is a whisper. Every failure is a page. Whatever causes you pain, if seen correctly, will teach you how to grow stronger, not by becoming hardened, but by becoming deeper and more self-aware. In truth, most of your growth hasn't come from pleasant moments. It comes from the pain you've endured the first time you were rejected, the time you had to walk away from something you loved, the moment you learned how to stand up on your own. In those moments, you didn't feel lucky, but in hindsight, you'll realize, without those collisions, you wouldn't be who you are today. This doesn't mean you have to fake positivity or deny your pain. Stoicism doesn't ask you to smile while you're breaking. It simply invites you to ask the right question in the middle of the storm. What part of me is being trained right now? What is being sharpened through this hardship? Maybe it's patience. Maybe it's letting go. Maybe it's confidence that doesn't depend on others. And sometimes it's just learning how to endure without losing the kindness in your heart. Every hardship carries a gift, but it isn't wrapped in glittering paper. It's wrapped in exhaustion, self-doubt, loneliness, and disorientation. If you're not patient enough to unwrap it, you'll miss the lesson it offers. But if you dare to face it, observe it, and walk through it without turning away, what you receive is more than a lesson. It's a new version of yourself. Wiser, braver, more grounded. Life never promises ease, but it is always fair to those willing to learn. And once you accept that every hardship is a strict but honest teacher, you'll stop fearing it. You'll walk into each trial with eyes open, a steady heart, and the spirit of someone being forged not to become perfect, but to become real. I used to think that being strong was enough, that if I controlled my emotions, worked hard, and never let anyone see my weakness, then things would be okay. But life taught me something else. Control is not suppression, it is awareness. Strength is not about never falling, it is about facing yourself when you do. Every time I paused instead of reacting, every time I named the emotion instead of being led by it, every time I let go of what I couldn't control and returned to what I could, I felt a quiet, unmistakable peace. I no longer try to win every battle out there. I focus on the battle within, where I learn to keep my heart straight, respond with reason, and not let others pull me away from my core values. And it is in that space that I see myself truly growing. If you find this journey meaningful, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss future content. And remember, self-mastery isn't about never feeling pain. It's about knowing when you hurt, understanding it, moving through it, and continuing on with reason and resolve. See you in the next video.